This
Will
conference
do.
will now be recorded.
Oh boy. Good evening, everyone. I thank you for coming on this evening for our work session. It's been a little while since we've been able to get together on a work session. And before we get into any of the content of the session, we're going to ask our legal team through Ms. Powell to make an opening statement.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, board members. I just would like to make a quick statement that this meeting, this work session by the Board of Supervisors is being held electronically, consistent with Governor Northam's amended Executive Order 3 and the Surrey County Continuity of Government Ordinance that is in place due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As such, this meeting is being convened by GoToMeetings, and that information has been posted on Surrey County's website. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. Again, thank you all for coming in on this meeting this evening. It has been a little while since we've been able to have a work session with all that has been going on in the county. Well, there were a couple of issues that I wanted us to be briefed on. We have seen memorandums to come to us, but I believe that these are going to be some hot topics in the county coming up very soon. And I wanted us to be very knowledgeable about these topics before we deliberate on them or vote on them, and if there were any questions that we could talk and discuss it tonight. And that's the purpose for work sessions, to make sure that we can be well informed as we strive to move the county ahead. There are three items that I felt like we needed to discuss tonight, and I'm sure that you all have received emails on them, and that is the legislation that has been passed down from the General Assembly in regard to solar. And our legal team, Ms. Powell, is going to make a presentation on that, and also the legislation on the removal of Confederate statues and monuments within the county, the legislation that has been passed down on that as well. Again, I just want us to be fairly knowledgeable about these two subjects, and also issues with the EDA in the county, working with the board and staff. So these are three things I think that draw our attention on tonight. And so at this time, I'm going to give way to Powell so that she can brief us on the legislation. I know we have read the memorandum on it, but I just want to open a dialogue between board members on this, if there be any, on the legislation that's been passed down regarding solar power. Ms. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm more than happy to provide a quick summary as it relates to legislation, but just so I understand the order, are you wanting the presentations on the legislation first, or would the chair and the board be interested in taking up the discussion with the MOU first?
The presentations on the solar first, and then if there be any discussions or questions on that amongst board members or of you, and the same thing with the legislation on the monument. I would like to do the MOU with the EDA as the last item of business.
Okay, no problem. I will then move into the solar legislation first. So as the chair said, I have provided a memo to the board as relates to solar. So what I'm going to do is kind of provide a summary of what the General Assembly has passed this past session, and hit the highlights of what will probably be the most relevant portion of the county. Of course, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them, and I will do my best to do so. So again, as of July 1, the General Assembly passed a lot of legislation. There's a lot of movement as related to solar this year. As I'm sure most of the board members know, most solar projects are 80% exempt from machinery and tools tax. They pay other taxes, but there's that exemption from machinery and tools, and they pay about 20%. So as a result, there was an argument that localities were not getting their fair share of revenue. And so as an attempt to kind of correct that issue, certain bills were introduced and passed. And so what I'm going to provide you can kind of be considered tools in the toolbox that the county has at their disposal when there are future applicants for solar projects. The first one that I will talk about is the conditional use permit for solar projects. The board has previously approved, I don't know how many CUPs in the past, and usually when you do that, you're imposing conditions that kind of hit and satisfy some sort of additional impacts that the project is bringing to the county, but there hasn't been any sort of cash tied to those conditional use permits. But now, as a result of this legislation, localities are able to accept either cash or real property for any solar project. It is tied, though, the property or the cash does have to be tied to or reasonably related to the impacts of the particular project. So there can't be a condition or requirement that an applicant dedicate any sort of property or proffer some sort of, or to provide cash without it relating to the project itself. And so if the board is interested in going forward with this particular legislation for a CUP, then an ordinance would need to be adopted it would have to be added to the zoning ordinance. And then when there is a applicant that comes forward in the future, it allows the locality to have a discussion about whether or not to impose a condition of requiring cash or some type of real property. The other piece of legislation is the revenue share ordinance that I know the board is familiar with. This is another option that the county has to adopt an actual revenue share ordinance, which will also require a public hearing. The legislation allows the board to impose an assessment of up to $1,400 per megawatt on all solar projects, except those that are 5 megawatts or less, or if they're 20 megawatts or less, if there has been an application filed with the transmission organization as of 2018. But going forward, there's likely going to be, if the board adopts this ordinance, a $1,400 assessment. And if this ordinance is adopted, like I said, it would apply to all future applications. You can't pick and choose which one you want to apply it to. It would just apply across the board unless the applicant meets one of the 2 exceptions that I just mentioned. I'd also like to point out that if the ordinance is adopted, then there is 100% exemption from machinery and tools tax. So like I said at the beginning, right now they're paying about 20%. So if you adopt this ordinance, there will be no payment of M&T tax. There is, I'd like to bring to your attention though that the Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy is currently working on a decision tool, which seems like it will be very helpful because it's supposed to kind of act as a guide to help localities determine whether or not M&T taxes or revenue share ordinance is the better option for a locality. And so it may be worth waiting to adopt an ordinance to see what exactly the Department of Mines and Minerals and Energy comes out with. And so there's no real rush to adopt it now, but I just want to let you know that that option is out there. Another piece of legislation that has passed is the citing agreement legislation. This is just another way for localities to get some additional revenue. It applies to Surrey because we fit into the definition of the being eligible for federal opportunities. And most of the southern areas do fit that criteria. And this one allows localities and the applicant to negotiate the terms of a citing agreement and allows the locality to accept funds that aren't restricted. So those funds can go towards local capital projects that are included in the county's capital improvement plan. The funds can go to broadband or the current fiscal budget. There is just much more latitude with those funds, which is in contrast to what I mentioned about the CUP originally, because those funds are tied to a particular purpose. With the citing agreement, that is something that the board would approve. That agreement itself would not need to go before the planning commission, but it would require that there be a public hearing prior to the board accepting that agreement. And if it is approved, then that agreement is binding on the current board and future boards. One thing that I would like to note that is interesting because it is included in the legislation is that if there is a failure of the applicant and the governing body to enter into a citing agreement, that may be a factor in the decision of the governing body whether or not to approve a land use application for solar. But it is, I want to emphasize that that is not the only reason a board or the board could deny a project. It's one reason, but not the sole reason. And so those are the 3 or 4 that I wanted to bring to your attention that I thought were really the highlights of the legislation for this year. But I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have as it relates to that.
I cannot hear Reverend.
Ms. Paul, what was the last thing that you said as far as for being able to deny? I was kind of breaking up. I couldn't hear that well.
Sure. So the citing agreement, if the board and the applicant cannot agree to enter into a citing agreement, that may be one factor that the board considers in if to deny it, assuming that it already planned to deny the project. That just can't be, failure to enter into an agreement cannot be the only reason why the board doesn't approve it.
Ms. Powell,
Yes, ma'am.
citing agreement between the board and the solar company, you're speaking of the decision we need to make about where in Surrey County the piece of property that we are going to be agreeing would be good for solar? Is that what the citing agreement is about?
The citing agreement is more of a financial tool. I'm getting some feedback. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you now.
Okay. So the citing agreement is more of just an agreement as to, I really just consider it to be more of a financial agreement where the applicant is following all the typical zoning protocols and processes that they have to do anyway. But in addition to that, there is revenue that the county may be able to get as a part of the application.
Thank you.
Approval if that happens.
Okay, Ms. Powell, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. On the revenue sharing, and I think one of the things that I was trying to look into. I know that if you do the revenue sharing, you don't have mechanical or tool tax. You can't do both. Over a course of time, will there be any reduction in the revenue sharing? I know it's $1,400 per megawatt now, but over time, just like machinery and tool, that will reduce. Will the revenue sharing reduce per megawatt over time?
That is a good question, and it's really up to the General Assembly. So right now, we could assess up to $1,400 per megawatt, and it would not be reduced after any amount of time. It's just supposed to be a steady revenue stream. That does not mean that the General Assembly couldn't come back in 5 years and change the number. I would be surprised if the number were decreased. I would think that if anything, the number could increase. But as far as there just being a decrease like machinery and tools tax, no, that would not happen.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Mike Drury.
Yes, Mr. Drury.
Ms. Powell, I got just three questions. Timing of a revenue share ordinance and filing by applicant. Any idea? In other words, if a solar company files an application with us and we approve an ordinance after that, any issues with that?
Mr. Drury, I apologize, you're going in and out. Can you repeat the question?
If a solar company files an application with the county, and then after that we approve a revenue share ordinance, will it apply to that applicant?
I think it would apply, but it may be one of those situations where they actually let me pull up the legislation really quickly so I can check something. But I think the way the ordinance reads is that the legislation is effective as of July 1. So I think whenever the board adopts the revenue share ordinance, then it would apply going forward. And so I think the answer to your question is, would it apply retroactively? And I think the answer to that would be no, unless the applicant was willing to have the ordinance apply retroactively to it.
So specifically, I'm thinking solar companies that are looking to apply right now. Again, after July 1, I would assume that it would apply.
If we adopted the ordinance, yes.
Yes.
Right.
My second question is, how do you see the citing agreement being approved by the board, and then you've got a zoning case going on? Have y'all thought about how that actually flows by process?
I think that they could be done simultaneously. Typically, and I think the legislation, I don't have that piece in front of me, but I think there's a part in there that says when an applicant wants to have a solar project in a locality, they have to provide written notification to the county that they would like to meet and discuss a citing agreement. So I think that it's more of a simultaneous process as opposed to a consecutive process.
So possibly these agreements would say, if the rezoning request is turned down in the agreement, it would say this agreement is null?
There wouldn't be an agreement if the project isn't approved. So there's I would see the citing agreement being separate from the actual zoning application. And the zoning application, once it gets to the board, would be approved or denied. And if approved, then there would be a hearing on the citing agreement. And that would either
Okay,
be.
sure, thanks. My last one is the federal opportunity zone. I know that the legislation talks about it being site specific or tract specific. Do you know, I'm assuming that all properties in Surrey County would come underneath the opportunity zone or not, or do you know?
I believe they do, and the Department of Housing and Community Development has an interactive map that shows those opportunity zones. And I did see at one point, and if I can put my hand on it, I'll be more than happy to provide it to you. But it showed all of Surrey being as a qualified zone.
And that's it, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or concerns from board members on this matter, on solar in the county?
Mr.
See you, Ms. Love.
I have a question about the which department, federal department, did she say we could maybe perhaps get some more information on the opportunity zone?
I believe it's the Department of Housing and Community Development.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. Last thing, it may be self-explanatory, but that's why we're here to discuss different things. With the CUP for future applicants, and it says that cash is on the table now. Are there any set limits that you can negotiate this with?
Are you asking if there's a set cash limit?
Yes.
No, I don't think there is. I think the solar special exception legislation just says that you can accept property, or it says substantial value of cash payments or property, but the important piece is that those conditions have to be, if you're going to impose that type of condition, it has to be tied to an impact from the project itself.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Powell. Mr. Holmes or Mr. Calhoun, you have any questions on this?
No, I don't at this point.
All right. We are clear as water on this. Thank you so much. All right. Next item I would like for us to discuss. We know that we have a public hearing coming up in August on the legislation passed down on the monuments in the county, and we have such monument in our county in front of the Circuit Court building, and the citizens of the county, they have been petitioning us on this matter, and I just wanted us to be crystal clear on what we can and what we cannot do, dealing with the procedure of this particular not item, but particular entity on our agenda. So at this time, I know we had legislation and we had some things handed down to us again in memorandum, but I would like for us to have some type of discussion and a summary on the legislation that was passed down, so we will know as a board what we can do and what we can't do. So again, I asked Ms. Powell if she would come. I believe it's on her to come and give us a summary on that legislation as well.
Sure. Again, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm happy to provide a summary of the procedure as it relates to the removal of Civil War memorials. As again, just a little bit of brief history, before July 1, the localities did not have the authority to remove or contextualize or cover Civil War memorials, but that did change. And so as of July 1, localities now do have the authority to remove, relocate, contextualize, or cover the monuments or memorials. And so if the board wishes to pursue action, there really are two procedural steps that have to be followed. The first is to schedule a public hearing, which the board has already done. And so after the public hearing, the board can either vote as to which of the four actions it wants to take, meaning it can vote to remove, relocate, contextualize, or cover the memorial, or the board can decide not to take any action and not vote. And if the board does decide to vote and take an action, then the board would need to offer that monument for relocation and placement to a museum, a historical society, government, or military battlefield for 30 days. The board does not have to accept any of those offers, but should entertain any offers that it receives. The board ultimately does retain the authority to make the final decision. So, if you get an offer and the board decides to not accept it, there's no requirement that you do so. There's another option, which is to ask the circuit court to order a non-binding advisory referendum in the county on the question of whether to remove, relocate, contextualize, or cover the monument. But again, even after that referendum is done and the answer is in, the decision is still up to the board as to what it would like to do with a particular monument or memorial. So we are still in the first step, and then we would move on to step 2 about offering it out for 30 days. That is the summary of the new legislation, and I will do my best to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Powell, for the summary. I only have one question on this because it's coming up on our August special public hearing meeting. If we decide to remove this or relocate it, and I know we have the 30 days that we have to wait for offers to come in for relocation, but within the legislation it says that the monument can be covered. Can we cover it before those 30 days, or do we have to just leave it like it is for that entire 30 days?
That is a good question, Mr. Chair. And the board, the legislation doesn't say what actions can actually be taken within those 30 days while it is out to be, while it's offered. So I guess, that's something that I'm happy to look into. My initial inclination is to just leave the memorial as is, just wait until the 30-day period before any action is taken. But that's a good question.
Appreciate that.
Doesn't say.
Okay. Are there any other questions from board members on the Confederate monument?
Mr. Chair, Mike Drury.
Yes, Mr. Drury. Thank you.
Ms. Powell, what has been done about looking at the legal ownership of the monument, just to make sure that all is clear?
We're looking into that, but I'd like to tell the board that it does say that it's property that's, monuments that are located on public property. So, we're going to continue to follow that process.
And I should have been more specific to make sure that the county has clear title to it, so we won't have any legal challenges, I guess.
Understood. Yes, we are looking into that, Mr. Drury.
And just one more statement. Ms. Powell, you had directed us to the Department of Housing and Community Development website. And while you were discussing monuments, I looked it up, and it does not have any tracks in Surrey at the present time, but I'm not sure why.
Okay, when I looked at it, it was there, and so I'll see if I can find that for you and forward it along.
That will be fine. And this was on the map on the Virginia Department of Housing website, the interactive map, but just curiosity. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Powell, on the question that I just want to follow up on the question that Mr. Drury just asked about legal ownership. I believe we did receive an email from Mr. Hefty stating that that we should be in the clear with that because there were no records in the circuit court stating that it was the property of anyone else. Am I correct with that?
That is my understanding.
Okay.
Mm.
Are there any other questions from board members? Please feel free. This is what we're here for, so we can be clear on what we're doing.
My answers, my questions are pretty much been cleared in terms of questions.
Yes, Mr. Cowell.
I know that there have been discussions about relocating the monument. Have there been any, like anyone accepted the monument? Has the board or the staff heard of any places that would accept it as of to date?
Ms. Calhoun, as of to date, as far as I am knowledgeable, we have not had anyone to accept it. I know we've inquired about it, but we haven't had anyone to accept it at this time. And if and when we make that decision, I'm sure that we will be searching even the more or waiting to hear from somebody within that 30-day period before we do anything as far as finding a permanent place for it to go.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, board members, I know this is going to be coming up. We all know this is coming up in our public hearing in August. So if there's any discussion on it, I think we're well informed now what we can do in regards to this. So thank you, Ms. Powell, for the presentation on those two items on solar and the monument in the county. At this time, if there are no other questions on those two items, we're going to move into the EDA of the county. And I'm going to ask at this time if our county administrator, Mrs. Rollins, if she will come in and lead discussion on this.
Good evening, Chairman Elliott and Chairman, Vice Chairman Drury, members of the board, and all who are on the virtual call tonight. Thank you so very much. I am presenting this work session agenda item. I want to say in advance, in the spirit of cooperation that is certainly needed between the Board of Supervisors, the county, and the Economic Development Authority. The purpose of the Memorandum of Understanding that you do have before you is to establish collaborative working relations between the county and the Economic Development Authority to incentivize commercial investment for job creation, community well-being, and economic growth for the benefit and citizens and businesses of Surrey County, Virginia. The memorandum was presented to the Economic Development Authority back in, I want to say it was October of 2019. And in turn, the Economic Development Authority did revise and created a draft that they brought to the Economic Development Subcommittee as their proposal in the form of a memorandum of agreement. The initial draft was prepared again by the Attorney's Office with staff input as relating to the position that the county felt at that particular time that you wanted to take as far as getting the agreement with the Economic Development Authority. You do have it before you. I do want to say that since that time that staff has looked at the agreement, and because it has been quite a while since we've been in this COVID state, to look at it again, and we do have 1 or 2 changes that we want to make to that initial MOU that was prepared by the attorneys. And there's only 2 particular sections. The first one pertains to the meetings. Because the Board of Supervisors did in January elect to create the Economic Development Subcommittee, that was forethought, in that we knew that it would be very good for the boards to work together. So that is why that economic development pertaining to all the important initiatives that the county had going on would be a good thing to have on the Board of Supervisors. So with that said, the meeting paragraph A has been recommended for revision, and that revision simply states that the Surrey County Board of Supervisors Economic Development Subcommittee will schedule quarterly meetings with the Economic Development Authority Executive Committee to discuss economic development opportunities and growth in the county. We do have another sentence in there that states that because this is a meeting that the Board of Supervisors Subcommittee and staff will schedule with the Economic Development Authority, that we would certainly provide the agenda for those discussion topics. And it also states that obviously because economic development is fast-paced, a lot of times there are things that come up that may not necessarily be planned because we are looking for those potential opportunities. So all the time there are opportunities that meetings may need to be scheduled outside of any quarterly meetings. So that paragraph does add that caveat. There's meetings may be also scheduled as needed to discuss pending projects or ideas as they arise related to economic development in the county. So that is the major change that we wanted to make to the proposed MOU. And again, I do feel that that particular statement does add a layer of cooperation and collaboration between the 2 boards. The next change that we speak to in terms of paragraph B, it talks about the structure. You all know, of course, the structure of the county in terms of our economic development staff and the reporting of that particular staff. It states that the economic development director does report to the county administrator. The county administrator directs the work and activities of the county staff to include direction on providing assistance to the Economic Development Authority on specific county economic development projects and activities. That particular paragraph was a slight adjustment because we want everyone to understand the relationship between the county administrator being the person who actually directs the activities of staff. It does state in here that the Economic Development Authority, which under its own powers, does have the authority to employ and compensate employees, and they're listed here and others as they seem necessary. The EDA, in this particular case, and we do know, does not have direct authority to direct staff or commit county funds to compensate staff because there is only one particular agency of the county, and that is the board, who charges the county administrator to direct the work of staff. However, I do want to say to that does not in no way means that the county staff has not worked with and does not intend to work with the Economic Development Authority, as it has done on several initiatives in the county. Obviously, both boards have skill sets and expertise, and we do recognize that it is a very good thing for these 2 particular boards, and along with staff, to be able to work together for the benefit of economic development in Surrey. The last change that we're making, that we propose to make, is to, and let me get my notes here. And that is it, sir. I do apologize. That was the last change. So that was the only revision. And after looking at this over the course of time, that we are recommending you to consider in the agreement that we would like the Economic Development Authority to consider. It is a simplified agreement. It is not extensive. I do believe that it does provide the spirit of cooperation in which we as staff and you as the board has done in terms of working with the authority. And we are hopeful that the Economic Development Authority would proceed with signing off on the MOU. As you may know, we do have, we hope to have additional opportunities that will come to the county, and we know that it is very important that the county show a unified front in terms of how we are working together for economic development purposes. And I do believe that, you know, a simplified agreement such as this will provide that face to any type of agency or organization or granting authority, any type of business that is looking to come to the county to show that we do have a particular understanding in place and that the EDA and the board and staff are working together for the end benefit of the entire community. If you have any questions, this is the report for this evening on this agenda note.
Thank you, Ms. Rollins, on the presentation in regards to the EDA and the staff. Just one question before I proceed with this. The changes or the adoption of the changes, the revisions, have they been reviewed by our legal staff? Have they given approval on these changes?
Yes, and legal staff is on, but I can, before they come on, I do want to say that, and I do see EDA members on the call, and I do want to say that we did send this to the attorneys, and this was just done recently for the purpose of everybody's on the call. This is something that was just done recently in preparation for the meeting on this evening. And I did forward also a copy to the executive team of the Economic Development Authority for them to have, and certainly to be able to go back and share this with other members of the Economic Development Authority for their consideration. The only other thing, Mr. Chairman, that I do want to add is there are many times where we are hope, and these times have happened before with the broadband agreement, and certainly the most recent agreement with the business incentive grant, that there will be additional what we call performance agreements or memorandum of understanding that would happen when there are specific projects that we would certainly need the Economic Development Authority to assist in those endeavors. So this is just a basic MOU, but again, when there are specific projects that come about, then obviously we have to consider how we're going to handle those projects, and then you create those separate type of agreements as done before for the Economic Development Authority to be active in those specific agreements.
Okay, thank you so much. I think the order of business at this time, and we will have further discussion on this, is directed to the Board of Supervisors, the members of the board, to adopt the changes and the revisions to the MOU. And if any board members have any questions on the revisions, ask that you would ask them now, so we can make sure we have clarity on those, so that we can have a unified MOU that we are presenting to the EDA for adoption. Fellow board members, any questions on the changes or the adoption of the revisions?
Mr. Chair, Mike Drury,
Yes, Mr. Drury.
are you asking us to adopt this MOU tonight?
Yes, sir. If they're after discussion, if we're clear on it, I think we need to adopt it before we present it to the EDA for them to sign off on it. We need to adopt the changes, yes.
I'm not the rest of the board members. I'm just one vote. I'm not comfortable doing that. I feel like it will be forcing something on the EDA that won't create cooperation. Just my thoughts. I'm not prepared to vote tonight.
Any other board members?
I'm under the impression that both boards are in agreement with it.
That was my impression as well. That's why I was asking us to accept the revisions. The MOU is already in place. We've already approved the original MOU back in, I believe it was April, that when we were in meeting, before April, we approved the MOU and we sent that to the EDA to adopt. Now we're coming back with revisions to include quarterly meetings, and it's giving more direction as far as work relationship between the board and county and staff. So it's not a whole new MOU. It is just some revisions that's spelling some things out a little clearer. And I didn't know that there was any opposition. And if there's opposition to the revisions, that's why we're here in the work session, to make things plain and clear. Because as Ms. Rollins has stated, with the EDA and the county and economic development in the county, we do need to present a cohesive front to any future investors. We have all said that we want economic development in the county. And I know some of these investors that's looking at coming into the county, this is one thing that they're going to look for, is a MOU so that they would feel comfortable investing in the county. My whole thing is we should be able to work together, and we should be able to have protocol, and this is spelling out the protocol and how we want to be able to work. We want the EDA to be an active organization within the county, but we need to have certain things spelled out so that we won't cross anybody and that we can move the county forward. Cooperation is the main thing that I think the MOU is presenting, and if we can have cooperation, I think we can grow the county. So that is my position on it, and I would ask that the board would adopt the revisions and changes, because it's not tying the hand of anybody. It's not forcing anything down anybody's throat. It is something that will show future investors that we're united in the county.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to direct.
Yes, Mr. Drury.
It sounds like you're in opposition to what I'm saying. I just want to point out that this says the agenda tonight says discussion topics. I don't see anywhere on here that says approval. Does anyone know that's on this call when the EDA got this draft agreement?
Well, we can have the EDA. Ms. Rollins can address that, but I don't have any problem with, since it is a work session, I don't have a problem with anybody from the EDA speaking on this matter.
The reason I ask it is, again, if it's just recent, I don't think that it is in the spirit of cooperation. And I'll be quiet after this because I'm assuming they haven't had much time to see it.
Mr. Drury, that is correct, sir.
I understand your point of view.
I apologize, Mr. Elliott, but may I answer Mr. Drury's question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Mr. Drury, you're absolutely correct. And earlier I did mention that, again, the revisions were just made on last evening. And I did indicate earlier that I just forwarded to the executive committee of the EDA on today. So you're right, they are just seeing these revisions, but I do want to add that these are the only two things that's added extras that we're hoping that adds more of a collaboration than the original agreement that was prepared. So you're correct in that they have not had time to see it, but it adds, I just wanted to make sure everybody clear that it does add that extra layer of a collaboration, because it's saying we need to meet as a two boards to be able to meet quarterly. And then that's pretty much the major change, which if I were to make a guess from the Economic Development Authority, membership, that is something that they would like to see as well. I do know in the past, there had been, meetings whereby, they were meeting with past administrators on a monthly basis and things of that nature. But again, by you, the board, creating that ED subcommittee, it does provide an opportunity for the two boards to meet. So it's not a problem, at least for me, if I may add this later, that if they don't necessarily get adopted, but I just want to make sure that we understand that hopefully the change would be a change that is desired by the EDA, because it adds to and does not take away.
Ms. Rollins, if I may ask, in the copy that was provided to the board, there's a highlighted area in paragraph C, 2C.
Mm-hmm.
Is that additional revision or not?
I can tell you that, sir. In paragraph C. No, sir. That is not a condition. I think on that particular one, and you're right, it says, let me read the highlight for the purpose of providing the call. It says the Economic Development Authority should not act as the governing body's legal or authorized representative for economic development. So that's what that reads. But the original agreement, let me tell you that right now. Is that one? Give me 1 second. I am pulling it up.
Mr. Chair, this is Robert Chandler.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Mr. Chandler.
I'm pulling up the agreement.
May I speak when Ms. Rollins is finished?
Yes, sir. I want to give you an opportunity to speak. I was going to address the question to you, and after Ms. Rollins speak, I'll be directing it to you.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the original agreement, in paragraph C, it stated, it stated that this MOU shall not authorize the authority to act as the governing body's legal or authorized representative for county economic development. So that statement was in there. The only change it was taken out was saying this MOU. So that is the only change. So I do apologize for not saying that earlier, but that statement reads again in the earlier draft. It says this MOU should not authorize authority to act as the governing body's legal or authorized representative for economic development. So the only change again is taking out the word this MOU.
Thank
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. I'm going to refer to Mr. Chandler for 1 minute, but I want to let the board know the reason why I was asking for an adoption to the revision of the changes is because we need to have a MOU that we can present to them to ask them to adopt. That's the only reason. Not trying to force anything on them, but we need a concise MOU that we're going to present to them for their consideration. Okay, Mr. Chandler, you can come in now.
Is he there?
Are you still there, Mr. Chandler?
Chairman Elliott, can you hear me? This is Joyce.
Yes, Ms. Henderson, we can hear you.
Yeah, because you couldn't hear me before, so something keeps blocking. I don't know what the problem is, but maybe that's what's going on with Mr. Chandler's phone.
Yes,
or
I
connection.
can hear you.
Okay. Let me just ask, Bob, did you come back? Then may I speak?
Yes, I'm back on, but you dropped. Yes.
Oh.
Yes, you dropped off, and that's why I spoke up.
Well, I didn't punch anything.
Go ahead.
It was okay. Good Good evening, Mr. Chairman, the rest of the Board of Supervisors, County Administrator Rollins, and staff present, and any fellow EDA members that are present, and others on the line. We understand everything that's been said. We're just perplexed, however, because none, well, just about most of the input that we provided as a result of the two representatives from your board and from the EDA board meetings have not been incorporated or even responded to. So here we sit, having done the work to put together a collaborative MOU, and we are being presented with pretty much the same one that got this whole process started. So it's, I think we had made it clear from the first presentation, and by the way, thank you. This is the first time we've been able to speak at all to the MOUs. Other meetings that we've been on, the EDA reps were not invited to make comments or present anything. But we did present that a bigger underlying concern that we had was the fact that the past MOUs dealt with the that the pathway of the EDA operating in conjunction with the Board of Supervisors and the county was that of more of a passive role. And by passive, we mean one that is not involved in the early stages of project exploration and definition, but is only called in when needed to facilitate implementation, versus the more active EDA, which would work with the county in a collaborative manner to explore, design, and implement economic development projects, would not just be called in when needed, but would be part of the actual process of identifying and also following through and implementing. So for the EDA, the MOU is easy to finalize. Once you, the county, and the board tells us, is it that, because this MOU reflects of what would be considered more of a passive EDA, the inclusion of the comments that County Administrator Rollins made about the meetings, that helps a great deal. Yes, that is definitely an improvement. But the tone and the flow is still that of more of a one-sided versus a collaborative. But I think we can work on whatever it needs to say if we are clear. We, the EDA board, is clear about you prefer a more passive EDA versus a more engaged EDA. And that's a question
Ms.
we
Ross,
have
you wanna...
for you as a board, or Miss, however you care to answer.
Well, I believe that we want the EDA to be engaged. It's not that we want you to sit back and be passive, but being engaged, we still need to have protocol so that everybody be working on the same page, so not everybody will be cutting across each other. And the protocol is by you being, this is just me speaking now as one member of the board, being aggressive and being engaged. If you're going to take on some projects, anything of that, it still needs to go through the proper channels with the EDO and staff and brought back to the board. We have to be on the same page. So I don't think anybody's trying to tie the EDA's hand. We want economic development, but it still has to go through the proper protocol so we can all be on the same page.
And we agree with that comment about protocol and being on the same page, which is why we were interested in changing a bit of the language in the original MOU to more reflect that. So there's no disagreement that we should be on the same page. That's the whole point of collaboration, is to be on the same page. But the opportunity, when that collaboration occurs, is probably the more pointed thing to look at. If it's occurring after everything is already decided and sorted out, then if that's the way it's to be, so be it. But if we know that going into this review of the final version of the MOU, then we can respond accordingly. On the other hand, if it is to be a little bit more of an engaged EDA, then there should be some things in there to make sure that, you know, we don't misstep, that we do what we should do in respect, you know, in collaboration with the county. So it's more of a one-sided MOU right now, and maybe that's the way it will end up being. I'm not trying to foretell what's going to happen after this, but I will say that on behalf of the EDA, that we were looking for an MOU that did show us in more of an engaged mode than a passive mode. And once we have that position, as I said, you said you were one member of the board. I understand that, Reverend Elliott or Chairman Elliott. But if the whole board feels that we should remain more in the passive mode, then the MOU doesn't need much changing. And even if it's engaged mode, it doesn't need a lot of changes. There are just a few places where a few words would help at least give some confidence that to the EDA that it's not trying to do business as usual, that it's been doing for the past eight years. That the board and the EDA relationship wouldn't be the same as it's been for the past 8 or so years. So if the bottom line kind of is, if we were hopeful that what would happen tonight is you would tell us your position, and again, thank you, Chairman Elliott, for saying you do want a more engaged EDA, but your board, the rest of your board, I guess, would need to express their feelings that way. Once that's determined, then leaving this meeting, and we need to have a special meeting so as not to hold this up any longer. We could suggest a few changes, get back to you. That was the whole idea of the two representatives getting together from the Board of Supervisors and from the EDA, but for whatever reason, all of the suggestions were pretty much ignored. We didn't understand why until we got the same document back, which suggested to us that the not as engaged is the preference for the county administrator and the Board of Supervisors.
I can understand what you're saying and your position very clear. But I think what I would like to know, and I think maybe the other board members would like to know, what is in the current MOU with the revisions that is preventing the EDA from being more engaged.
It doesn't invite us participating on, as I call it, the front end, the exploration, design, and implementation of economic development projects. Could you hear me?
Yeah, I heard you. I heard you loud.
I just want to make
Yes,
sure, because the connectivity has been an issue this evening. I don't understand what's happening, but and Mr. Chandler, are you back on?
Yes, I'm here. I can hear you.
Okay. Since he is the chair of the EDA,
Yes, Joyce, this is Bob.
okay, could Mr. Elliott, could we have him make any additional comments that he might like to make on behalf of the EDA?
Yes, you can. He can speak now. Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and the rest of the board. Thank you very much for your long service and appreciate what's been happening. The EDA has been passive. Their actions have been directed by the county administrator for, as mentioned by Ms. Henderson, for many, many years without any input asked or received by the EDA. The EDA is only asking, the EDA has many abilities and authorities to foster economic development that the county does not possess. What's been happening, let's say for a bond issue, the bond issue has only been brought to the EDA at the last minute and then asked to be approved. And being a passive group of people in the EDA, that has happened several times in the past. Our request boils down to, if we're going to be active, then we need to be brought in and understand the development for the county and be able to properly assist in that development. With this last minute effort that continues to be from the county administration, it makes that very, very difficult. I will be glad to forward to the board what the EDA can do and what the abilities of the EDA are and what the EDA can do even without discussion with the county. We don't want to do that. We want to be part of the development. But as Ms. Henderson said, heretofore, the EDA has not been part of that development. We've only been asked to participate if the board, or excuse me, not the board, but county administration can't do something, and then they come to the EDA and ask them, can they help? And I don't think that proper county development can be done without a cooperative agreement between the county and the board of, and the EDA, excuse me. And we never received a single comment or a single item from the representatives on the board to the EDA about the document we sent and we were asked to develop and forward to them. And that told us that the Board of Supervisors was obviously did not want an active EDA, they wanted a passive. And again, thank you very much for saying you wanted an active one, but the current MOU does not demonstrate that. That's all I have to say now.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler, for your comments. And are there any other comments from board members or the
Chairman Elliott,
staff?
this is Tim Calhoun.
Yes,
Just
Mr.
sitting
Calhoun.
back, sitting back on the board for a little over 6 months and listening to the conversation this evening, I would almost like to suggest that we give this draft to the EDA and have them review it and again try to make their comments and address their comments as opposed to asking them to adopt this MOU when I get a strong feeling from these comments that they don't choose to do that. And that way the board can review their changes to this revised MOU and try to work together in unity, as we should, to come up with a workable and unified MOU between both board members.
Thank you, Mr. Calhoun. Thank you, sir. Are there any other comments?
It's obvious some continued concern about both groups working together, and hopefully we can somehow make things a little bit somewhat more cohesive in the process.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. And I think the key here is working together, and we have to be able to respect everybody's position in this. Again, I don't believe anybody's trying to tie anybody's hand, but I believe that what needs to be established, what has to be established, is protocol, and that protocol will be followed in all situations. And I think if we can establish that, I think it'll be everything. We can resolve this issue. But we do know, having military background, protocol is of the utmost importance. We can't have anybody disrespecting anybody's position, and unity is the key. I don't think anybody wants to do anything to prevent Surrey County from growing economically, but we have to, and that's why MOU is of the utmost importance.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Rollins.
Sir, and certainly I'm following the direction of the Board of Supervisors, and if the attorney needs to add a comment, then they may do so. But I do want to just say, for the purposes of everybody on the call tonight, that the part of the content of the agreement that the Economic Development Authority provided does give an indication that we as staff would be overpromised and underdelivered. And I say that because I want everybody to understand the dynamic of Surrey County and where we are. In terms of some of the information, I do understand that a lot of localities do have robust EDAs, whereby they have several members of their staff who are directly responsible for working through the EDA. And I want to be able to just to share that we are different than perhaps say James City County or some other larger county that has a robust economic development authority and a large staff to be able to deal with economic development projects. So in essence, when we terms of we dealing with economic development, I think it's important for maybe a lot of people to understand exactly what and how the process works. Because if we do have, and in the MOU, it does state that the Economic Development Authority, your ideas are welcome. That I do think that we do want the Economic Development Authority to be able to present ideas to the county staff and to the Board of Supervisors for their consideration. I'm going to give you a prime example. The Economic Development Authority had the idea to present a food hub, okay? So they asked staff for assistance in providing support for the food hub, and the staff provided that assistance. Okay, so I want to be able to share. That's just one idea that was had. So if the Economic Development Authority has ideas that they want to present, then that is great. That is fine. We can entertain those ideas. But the purpose of what we had to say of what happened in the past that caused some of the impasse is because you have one group over here that's one staff to be able to do A, B, C, and D. But the same token, you as the board and the administration has charged economic development staff to do things over here. So when we cannot meet the expectations of the Economic Development Authority, it gives the undue and unfair assumption that we are not working together. So whatever we do and we move forward, in this particular case, I do want us to just to make sure that we're dealing with the dynamics of Surrey and where we are, and may not necessarily be the same dynamics when we're dealing with a different organization who are much larger and more robust than Surrey is. So that is just one example that I wanted to just point out that yes, the MOU does say that the authority does have the right, and we do encourage their ideas. And when staff can support those ideas, we can do so, but we just cannot have the competing, I guess is what I'm getting at, because we just don't have the staff resources to be able to do it. And if we don't do it, then it's fairly assumed that we're not working together, and that's just not the case. We just can't overpromise and undeliver because we're just too small of an organization to do that. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, Mike Drury.
Yes, Mr. Drury.
Just wanted to state that I appreciate all the comments this evening and appreciate what Ms. Rollins is saying. As I too have worked in large local government entities, and I've had this discussion with Ms. Rollins about the difference that you see in a rural community of ours and staff. Just for instance, Ms. Rollins is being pushed to the limits right now. I know she is at trying to handle daily activities with staff, citizens, and even board members. So I appreciate her talk on the limits. We have a lean staff. And with that said, and I know that all of us EDA members and all of us on the board, staff, we all want what's best for Surrey County. And so we have unity there. I don't disagree with the changes in this draft, and I appreciate Ms. Rollins doing that. All I wanted, again, and I appreciate Ms. Rollins making this statement, is I'm okay with saying, can we give this draft now with the changes to the EDA? Ms. Henderson, she's given this a lot of thought, with the understanding that one of the main issues is staff obligations, and Ms. Rollins has to have control over her staff because it's so lean. And just see what comments they have for the board. Now, whether that comes through the task force or comes back to the main board, that's to be seen, or even have Ms. Rollins participate in that smaller task force. But it's not me disagreeing with the MOU as much as it is, I don't want it to be perceived as pushing it on them. I really would like to have a cooperative effort in this. So I'm okay with forwarding it to the EDA, but with the understanding we want to see what their comments are, especially given what Ms. Rollins just said. And that's it. And thank you.
Mr. Drury, thank you for your comments, and I'm in total agreement with you. And that goes back to my original statement asking if we have to adopt the revisions. We cannot. We have to adopt the revisions before we forward it to the EDA to consider. The board has, if I'm mistaken, let me know. But I believe the board has to adopt the revisions to the MOU before we forward it to the EDA.
Mr. Chair, this is just difference in terminology. Rather than a formal adoption, okay, I would like to just have a consensus. I didn't want the EDA members to feel like I was trying to push it upon them. So we're just semantics of what we're talking about.
Yeah, sound like semantics, yes. Okay. Are there any objections from board members on the revisions to the MOU for the EDA? Are there any objections or questions on the adoption, on the revisions? No comments from board members? I take that as approval of the revisions then. So at this time, I'm going to ask our county administrator to forward this to the EDA for their consideration, and because the final act is going to be left up to the board to approve a MOU and send it to the EDA for adoption. We have to get this done. So Ms. Rollins, can we make that happen?
Yes, Chairman, I would be more than happy to do that. And I would be, yes, I would definitely do that. I would share that with Mr. Chandler, Mrs. Henderson, the executive committee, and the members of the Economic Development Authority. We'll do that, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Chandler, are you still on the line?
Yeah.
Mr.
Yes,
Chandler,
sir, I am.
or Ms. Henderson. Could you know, or could you give us a roundabout time when you could get back to us on this? Because this is a situation that I know that you would like to, and the board would like to put to rest so that we can move forward. Do you have a timeline when we can get back to the board on this?
The executive committee can get back to the board fairly quickly, early part of next week, but we still can't approve it until we hold a meeting of the EDA, and just like you do, have to approve it with the EDA as a board meeting.
So when is your next board meeting?
So it takes us, excuse me?
So when is your next meeting?
We have to go through the same process that you do. We have to schedule a meeting, post it, the agenda, and have at least supposedly a week's notice, but we have been told by legal that we can do it with as little as 3 days once we get a joint agreement between us and Obviously, Ms. Rollins has been brought into this to get an agreement on what the MOU should say. Normally, an MOU is developed once two or more groups get together and decide on a goal, and then the MOU is developed to reach those goals jointly, and then the two groups approve the MOU. This has not occurred in this case.
Mr. Chair, Mike Drury.
Yes, Mr. Drury.
And certainly this is just a suggestion, is to speed up this process. And I'm okay with other board members not agreeing with this. Ms. Little and I first met with Mr. Chandler and Ms. Henderson. Would it be okay that if Mr. Chandler and Ms. Henderson got together and made comments to this, and then Mr. Chandler, Ms. Henderson, Ms. Little, and I would like to include Ms. Rollins, get on a conference call to discuss that, see if we can come up with a draft to bring back to the board and the EDA. I think it would help speed it up.
I'm very comfortable with that. I think we need to make that happen, and then bring it back to the board so we can present it to the EDA for adoption. We need to get this done. Okay. Are there any other discussions with the EDA? I just want to reiterate the fact that we want economic development in the county, but we have to stress working together, working and respecting everybody's position so that we can move the county forward. And I hope that other board members in the EDA feel the same, as well as staff.
Yes, I can. If you're waiting for staff response, Mr. Elliott, the answer is
Yes.
yes.
Wait.
And I do like that idea that was just posed by Mr. Jury to be able to do that. And I do, and I have to say one last statement if I may, and I do like the comment as well to make sure that because staff obviously have to assist the Economic Development Authority in what they do. We have served as the treasurer, we have served as the secretary, we assist them with even all the activities, obviously, because they don't have, Apple staff and they're not full time, that our staff has to assist them in all their endeavors. We do ask for respectful cooperation from all the members of the Economic Development Authority. And I have to say that I do have been some crux of the impasse that we have in terms of trying to come up with some agreements, because obviously you do have some things that are in here because of, as you stated, because of certain things that have occurred. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that is very important. Economic development requires that everyone, as you stated, to be respectful of everyone's role and everyone's position, and to be able to understand that in order for everybody to be able to work together. So that's going to be very important in moving this whole thing along. And I'm excited about economic development in Surrey and to be able to work with the EDA. Part of their vision, again, is to have active and participatory citizens and agencies of the county. And that's something that, we definitely want to do. So I would be more than willing to sit down and make whatever adjustments, but keep in mind that is a key to it, is to be able to have that respect amongst both groups. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Rollins, for the comment. Respect is not only expected, it is required. We have to respect one another in our efforts. Let us always remain professional in everything we do. And remember, we do have an EDO. We have an officer, Mr. Harrison, in the midst of this as well. So we have to be respectful to one another in order to move the county forward. Are there any other statements or questions or comments in regards to the EDA and the Board of Supervisors working relationship?
Mr. Chair, Mike Drury.
Yes, Mr. Drury.
Just brief comment. Just thanks to everybody on this call tonight. It's conversations like this that we need to have to create a working relationship. And I'm optimistic that we can do it. And again, thanks for all of us, and thanks for listening to my comments and to all comments. I'm optimistic.
Thank you, Mr. Drury. Are there any other comments from board members now before we adjourn this meeting. Ms. Little, you good?
I am good, and I agree with the conversation on the EDA. And I'm willing
you,
to
ma'am.
work with Mr. Drury and Mr. Chandler and Ms. Henderson to get to where we need to be.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Holmes, you good? He must be good. He didn't say anything. Mr. Calhoun, you good?
I am good, Chairman Elliott, and thank you for the reconsideration and working with the DA.
Yes, sir. All right, thanks everybody for coming on. This meeting is now adjourned. I think we have a very successful work session and look forward to meeting with you on the first Thursday in August. God
No,
bless
sir,
you all. Thank you.
Second Thursday,
No,
Reverend Elliott.
Ms. Calhoun, we're going to have our regular meeting on the first Thursday. The second Thursday will be only for public hearing on the monument.
My apologies. I thought everything was moved to the second Thursday. I apologize.
No problem. I got clarification on that today as well. We're just going to deal with the monument on the second Thursday. That will come up in public hearing, and everything else will be as scheduled on the first Thursday.
Thank you, sir, for that correction. Thank you.
All right. God bless you all.
God bless you.
Thank you very, very much, Devon, for putting this connection on. You may or may not